Today we're going to disassemble, clean, and reassemble the Winchester 94-22 Magnum and try to make a quick video on how to take it apart, clean it, and put it back together. This is going to be the part 2 of my conservation video. Stay tuned. As always, the first thing that you want to do before handling any firearm or taking it apart to clean it or disassemble it is you want to check and make sure that it's not loaded. Point it in a safe direction. Make sure it's empty. Now in this case, we're going to leave it cocked, and I'm going to take the tubular magazine out and set it aside. Now, I have this little Packmeyer gunsmith screwdriver set. I'm going to find a bit that will fit right here, because that's the main screw that goes through the other side of the receiver here and holds the two halves together. So once I pull that apart, I'm going to unscrew this and be able to pull it apart. The two halves will come off, and I'll show you the front with the barrel will come off and the back of the receiver will come out. And I'll do that in just a second. Okay, I've got my screwdriver. You don't want to dig into this with a regular flathead screwdriver if you can help it, simply because the tip on a normal screwdriver is not ground flat like these type are. Usually these are flat-sided, and you can skip and then scratch and then mess it up. So if you look, I pulled that main screw out, and now this whole thing's ready to just pull apart, just like that. And we're going to leave this off to the side and cocked. I'm going to wipe it. It's been shot a few times, but it's not filthy. It's nice and clean in there. I got rid of all the crud and rust that had been in there previously on the last video about this gun. And if you look inside here, let's see if I can get a good light. There we go. This is where the action slides back and forth. You want to just pull that out, kind of hold it together so it doesn't fall off. I'm going to stick that to the side, and I'm going to wipe that down in a minute as well. And here, the receiver, the barrel, and that's what we're going to get in there with a brush in just a minute. Okay, so to do this job, we're going to use a old toothbrush, some gun oil. This is Ed's Red that I made up without acetone in it, so it's equal parts mineral spirits, kerosene, and transmission fluid. You can look that up online. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take a little bit on a Q-tip, and I'm going to slather it around inside the receiver here, just to get rid of some of the powder residue and dirt and stuff. And if you had watched the other video, you would have seen this was very rusty inside. Very rusty, and I scrubbed it and soaked it really good in this same stuff. The Ed's Red without the acetone, because the acetone will eat the wood finish. So I generally make it without it. So I'm just going to soak that real good and then wipe it out with a piece of old t-shirt. Now when you start getting into this stuff, you're going to want safety glasses. You may or may not want to use rubber gloves. Today I'm not using rubber gloves right now because I'm not going to get much on my hands, and I'm going to be quick and wash them off soon after. But normally I will wear nitrile gloves or rubber gloves. So I got all inside of here. Let's see if I can get that better. And I'm just going to wipe it out. But I'm also then going to take Ed's Red and some of these 22 patches, and I'm going to go down the bore with my coated brush here. Just a second. And again, it wasn't that dirty because the guy who owns this gun and I went to the range, test fired it, shot a few shots through it and then brought it back home. So I need to return his gun to him now that it's been cleaned up, sort of conserved, and I want to get that back to him this week. So I'm going to take a few patches, soak them in Ed's Red. Again, this is the kind with no acetone in it. Just put a little on there. I'm going to put a patch through, and then I'm going to let it soak for probably 10 minutes or something. I'm going to shut the camera off. But I want you to see, I'm using this little jag tip. And just line it up. And when you're using a lever gun, you want to make sure you don't get it into the tubular magazine. Make sure you're going down the barrel. So I'm going to let that soak, and then I'll come back. Alright, that bore has been soaking for about 5 to 6 minutes. While that was soaking, I wiped the internal parts down with a little oil. Wiped them with the rag and cleaned them up a little bit. But what I wanted to point out to you is this pin right here can just fall right out. Okay? So when you slide this in and out of the receiver, you want to make sure you keep that pin in place. And I don't recommend doing any disassembly of this where you will drop the pin and lose it, like outside on a bench or somewhere in a messy place, where, because it's a tiny little pin and it'll fall right out just like that. You know, you just move it and it falls right out, and these two pieces come apart. It's easy to put it back together. You line this hole up inside there, and then when you put it back in, which I'll show you in a minute, you kind of put a little pressure on it where the little spring-loaded disconnector is, and you slide the whole thing in, and this block ends up being at an angle a little bit, and this part goes in straight. So you tilt this slightly, push this in straight, and then it kind of clicks together. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. I also wiped down these parts with a little oil and a rag, and kind of left a little bit of a film on the internals. I don't want it wet, I just wiped it down. And I'm going to wipe all of the outside down and the top of the hammer and stuff once it's reassembled before I give it to my friend. I have waxed the stock with carnauba wax. It's in much better shape than it was when it got here. So I'm just going to push a clean patch or two through the bore and see what comes out. You know, everybody cleans slightly differently. Also, like I said earlier, this thing's not very dirty. It was not shot a lot. I cleaned it really well before we went to the range. And yeah, I'm going to put one more clean patch and call it a day. There's a hint of gray in there. And I believe the next patch will come out pretty white. I always wipe my rod with a clean rag, get any residue off of it. Again, different people do different things. A lot of guys wouldn't even go through this. They just kind of slop some cleaner around in there and then throw a bore snake down it. When I don't have to do that, I don't want to do that. And on this particular rifle, it's my friend's family heirloom. I just got done putting a lot of work into making it clean and nice, and you know, I don't want to do a rush job on the last cleaning. That patch wasn't centered very well, but it's good enough. I'm happy with how it came out. A quick look down the barrel, it looks beautiful. Alright, now I'm going to wipe the magazine tube with the oily rag a little bit. And if you remember from the first video, this was all covered in rust. Well, I wouldn't say covered. It had some bad patches of rust on it. And it was covered in a slight amount of corrosion. It's definitely cleaned up quite nicely since then. Okay, so back to this. What I was saying before. You want to slide the pieces together. You're going to line the hole up, and this spring-loaded disconnector is going to slide into this slot right here. Okay? And the whole thing lines up so that this will ride back and forth straight inside the receiver. And this firing pin and disconnector and all the little pieces ride in this block that actually tilts back and forth like this. When you cock it back and forth with the lever, it pushes this mechanism back and forth, and this tilts in and out of that slot right there. Okay, so you slide this together. You need to hold the pin in place slightly when you get it together. Now, if you could hear the click, I just pushed the little spring-loaded piece in, like I talked about earlier, in its slot. Now that pin will just fall right out again if I don't have a finger back there. So I'm going to tip it sideways, make sure it's centered, okay, and it's loose. It can just fall right out if I don't hold it, but I'm holding it. This tips, okay, tip my receiver upside down. Again, this part is going to stay straight. This has to be tilted slightly for it to go in the receiver. Make sure I get that. Because as I've said before, you probably can't see it good, but the block is tilted towards the camera down. Everything else is lined up. This whole thing slides in. Now it's sticking out slightly unless I push it in and lock it in place, which I'm not going to do because I'm going to let the gun do that for me. When I go to put it back together, well, I just did it. I pushed it and it clicked into place. But what's going to happen is the gun will do that for you when you put it back together. So this is cocked still. Okay? I'm taking the two halves and I'm going to slide them together. Like this. And there's a little tab in the front right there. You want to put that tab in the slot right there. You probably can't see good on camera, but there's a slot in there. You line it up. And of course now it just totally fell into place. And then this is sticking out a little bit. You can pop the handle together. Your hole, oops, that's not good. Your hole should line up. Take your screw, get it started. Now obviously you want to look closely, make sure it looks like everything's lined up before you go trying to jam the screw in there. You don't want to kill the screw to put it in place either and over tighten it. And once things are back together, slowly and carefully cock it a couple times, make sure it looks like the mechanism is working. Now I'm going to take it a step further and just wipe things down off camera, and then I'll come back and get a quick once over of it once it's done. But it's as simple as that. That's it. You want to make sure you go through the bore with the clean patch after you've put oil or solvent or whatever in there, just to clean it out. You don't want hydraulic pressure in there. You don't want junk building up inside it. So I'm going to put this magazine tube back in there and wipe the outside metal down with oil and then come back and say goodbye. Well, there it is. It is all prettied up. and cleaned, oiled, waxed, ready to roll. Came out really good. I don't know if you guys watched the original video or not, but if you didn't, go take a look at it and you'll see it looks a lot nicer. I know my friend's already really happy with it, and I'm glad that I could help them out. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Have a great day.